Spreaker Radio.
Yes, on Spreaker Radio. You've been listening to LPJ.
With Mr. and Mrs. Sweetthing.
Love, peace and joy. Amen.
And now we're going to be talking about a life of obedience. And we want to know, how do you make decisions? Do you try to determine what will benefit you the most? I know sometimes I do. But maybe your emotions control what decisions you make. But you know what we want to know is, what does the Bible say about obeying God? And we're going to start with Acts chapter 5 and verse 28 and 29. 28 is saying, did not we straightly command you that ye should not teach in this name? And behold, you have filled Jerusalem with your doctrines, and intend to bring this man's blood upon us. Then Peter and the other apostles answered and said, we ought to obey God rather than man.
That's right. We should obey God rather than man. But we have so long, we have let the world come into church.
Yes, we have compromised.
We've compromised so long that we're so used to letting the world contradict to church, what church should do, that we're used to it. We're used to doing what man said do instead of God. We need to get back to the old church, as the old folks call it.
Back to the basics.
Back to the basics. God's guideline, not man. You see, we have allowed too much to come into God's church. God said, I'm the same God today as I was last week and I was last year, 2,000 years ago. We proclaim we got to do this to attract the young folks. We got to allow this kind of music to attract the young people. We got to allow this kind of dressing to attract the young folks. We got to allow the young folks to do this to bring them into the church. Well, that's not so. Because if God is the same, and he was last week as he was 2 years ago.
And forevermore.
We don't have to change anything to get the young folks. What we have to change is the way we live.
That's right.
And the way we conduct ourselves as adults. And the way we live our life before our young people to get them to come into church. See, we go to church and we teach and one thing and we do another. We pretend to love our brothers and sisters before our kids, and then our kids see us behind the wall talking about the same person that we say we love, that we call sister so-and-so in church, and we give them a big hug, but then we get home, we call them everything brother and sister. Yeah. We are a deacon on the board, but we smoke more weed than the lady next door do. You see, we are deacon on the board, but we watching every young girl to walk down the street with the short dress on and whistling at them. You see, we don't set the example for our kids to want to come to church. See, we don't have to change the standards of God's church to get our kids to come in. We need to change our lives and the way we live and the way we walk. See, if we have God and get converted,
right,
then we can get our kids to come to church and want to be a part of God's church.
That's right.
See, we don't walk the walk, less long we don't talk the talk. But then we say we have to change and be more like the world to get our kids to be a part of God's church. No, we don't have to do anything but do what?
But obey what God is saying, like they did in Acts. They obeyed. They said we must obey God rather than man.
That's all we have to do is obey God's commandments and live God like God's standards has been already set way before we even come along.
That's right, because we got to remember we reap what we sow. Things, sowing and reaping, we got to remember that, because in Galatians chapter 6 and verse 7 says, "Be not deceived, God is not mocked. Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap."
Well, we don't.
So whatever decision we make, whether it's good or bad, we're going to reap it.
Well, that's our problem. We sow, and down the road we forgot what we sowed, and we expect to reap something good.
Mm-hmm.
And we sow onions, but 2 years down the road we expect to get strawberries, but we sow onions. See, and that's what we forget. That's what and our kids don't forget that we sold onions 2 years ago.
That's right, because every action has an impact.
That's right. But our kids remember, Daddy, you sold onions 2 years ago, but you want strawberries. Mm-hmm. And we trying to set this example before our kids that we sold strawberries, and our daughters and our sons remember we sold pickles and onions, and we're looking for strawberries, and we setting this kind of example before them. And they want to know why are we proclaiming to know God when the walk that we're walking do not smell too good. And we say we have to lean towards what they are used to, or what they that will attract them. No, we just need to change the way we walk and the way we talk as adults.
That's right. Our lives itself need to change.
Our lives itself needs to change. So we need to do what?
Be obedient.
Be obedient to God.
Mm-hmm.
We need to do what we need to give ourselves to God all the way.
That's right.
We need to give our whole self to God and let Him change us. So when we rise before our kids, they can see God in us. They don't see no God in us.
No.
They hear us talk about God. They hear us speak about God. They hear us say that we know God. But action...
Speak loud in words.
...is right. Action, they don't see anything. We say we love God, but we forget that love is an action word. And they see no action. But they hear a lot about this man, God, but they see none of it in us. And we preach God to them.
They see action, but the action is different from what we speak.
Well, the action that they see, they already have, so they don't see anything. Okay? You can't see something that you already have. God said the world should see something different.
I agree.
They don't see anything because what we're doing is what they already have. You can't see something that's already in you. Darkness you can't not see. People walking in darkness, everybody in darkness, you don't see anything.
Right, yeah. I agree with you.
This is what your kids see. They walking in darkness, you in darkness, you don't see anything, they don't see anything. We have to be different. We have to be the light. Your kids need to see light.
That is true. And then we was talking about in those disobedient Bible characters. You got to remember now in Numbers chapter 32 and verse 33 or 23. "But if ye will not do so, behold, you have sinned against the Lord, and be sure your sin will find you out." Now we find that out back in when Adam and Eve, what happened back in the beginning, very beginning. Before Adam and Eve,
well, before Adam and Eve, it was way before Adam and Eve. Lucifer was not the devil. Lucifer was God's right-hand angel.
Mm-hmm.
That sit at his right hand at the throne. And he went around lying on Jesus because he wanted to be worshipped. He wanted to be worshipped like God. He wanted to be important like God, which he was already important. But jealousy...
That's right.
Jealousy got the best of him.
So his pride and
disobedient, and just as it does to us today.
From the very beginning.
From the very beginning, like it did Eve, and it does the same thing today. We can see our neighbor with something and we get jealous. We get jealous and we start wishing we had it.
Coveting what our neighbor has.
This is the same thing we do today. And when our kids see that, and you supposed to be the deacon on the board, and he see you envying what the neighbor have, He see you slander the neighbor's name because of what he had. Now, your child do not see no light. We don't need to change and bring the world into the church. We need to change ourselves because we are the church.
That's right.
And maybe when we change ourselves and get some light into ourselves and our kids can see light, see Jesus in us, that's all we need to do.
That's true. And you got to remember about the nation of Israel.
Israel, that's right.
When they chose to be disobedient, they was out in the wilderness and didn't get to the promised land for, what, 40 years?
Well,
wandering for 40 years.
Because it was disobedient. They lost faith in God. Moses told them that you saw Jesus spread the Red Sea for you and destroyed Pharaoh and all his men and spread the Red Sea for you and freed you from slavery. And you still do not believe.
That's right.
And you still don't have faith. Little faith you all have.
Mm-hmm.
May God upset. We are the same way. God can heal you from cancer. And as soon as you get back up on your feet, you'll be back out there doing the same thing you're doing now. And when your kids see that, and you wonder why they're destroying each other like they're doing today. You wonder why they selling drugs. You wondering why your daughter's sleeping with this boy, sleeping with that man, because you set the example that God is dead.
Wow.
And you say we got to change the standard to meet them. No, you need to change the way you live. You need to change the way you walk so they can see the light of God in you.
The life of obedience.
Obedience.
Exactly.
We need to get back to the old standards of church, that life, the way we live. We need to show our kids that we are obedient to God. Then they'll learn how to be obedient to the law of the land. They'll learn how to be obedient to their bosses on their jobs. They'll learn how to be obedient to their parents. They'll learn how to be obedient to law itself. They can't obey God because they don't see no obedience in you.
That's right. And that's another thing. Another Bible character was Jonah. He did not want to go to Nineveh to preach the word so these people can be saved. That's why he was in the belly of the whale for 3 days.
We don't have to lean to the world. What we need to lean to is what? Surrendering ourselves unto God. So God can do what? Clean us.
He can cleanse us.
Cleanse us.
Purify
us. Sanctify us. Make us holy. He's looking for a holy church. And without any wrinkles and spots. He can only do that if we surrender ourselves to him so he can do that. Cleanse us.
That's right.
Rinse us with the blood and make us holy.
Mm-hmm.
And he can't do that until we surrender ourselves as a church so he can cleanse us.
That's right.
We don't have to change nothing in the church to make the church appealing to anybody. If you thought you had to change the church, you would start changing yourself.
Because we are the church.
You are the church. You're talking about changing the church, well, then do it. Change yourself. You ain't go out and go get no rock and roll band to put it in the church. If you believe that you're the church, then change.
That's right, because they also had, in the Bible, we had some faithful Bible characters. Noah was one.
Moses was another one.
And Moses was the one that, led the Israel out of Egypt. And Noah was the one that built the ark.
That's right. They was obedient to God, even though the world thought they was crazy.
That's right.
They thought they was crazy. Whether they did Peter and Daniel and all the rest of them, they did not understand those men because they was men that follow God.
They should have followed those crazy men.
That's right. They were men that followed
saved.
God. They thought these men. They thought they was nuts. They did not believe. They did not understand these men because they were a follower of God. They did as God told them to do.
Also, we had Joshua, who marched around Jericho for 7 days.
Well, because he obeyed God. Well,
obeyed.
I don't know if I could have obeyed like Joshua because he had such a small army growing